Today, you guys are in for a real treat. Before we get to the science on this channel, we often have these fun little intros. You can skip to the science, but some have told me these are the best part. This story introduces a new character to our channel, very closely based off of one of my not-so-bright roommates from the past. His name is Fezwick. I want you to imagine the ideal lifting buddy. Fezwick was the total opposite of what you're imagining. Mix in the ego and facial expressions of Derek Zoolander, and you have a Fezwick. So we were at this school gym. Now, I'd been lifting here for a few years and built up a decent strength base. So before I'd hit my working sets, I'd warm up with 20s, 40s, 60s, and 80s before hitting the 100s for my main set. Fezwick was the kind of guy who was always pretty suspicious. So when he noticed this, he immediately thought I was up to something. "You really like to jump the weights, huh?" is what he said. But I'm pretty sure he was thinking more along the lines of, "So that's his secret he's not telling me. I just need to make big jumps in the weights." Only because I've been doing this for a long time, so these are my warm-ups. Right. He jumps the weights up. If I do that too, I'll be just as strong as him. He just doesn't want me to be on his level. Trust me, man. Stick with the 45s and you'll make progress real fast. Faster than you might think. Huh? Oh, Dorian, what's up? Oh, hey, I saw you in class. That professor was really annoying, eh?
Yeah, he wouldn't shut up. Oh my god, I know. He was so annoying. And then I was thinking, what? What is this class even about? I know, right? And then the elephant walks by with the hippopotamus, and he's no, that'd be a rhino.
Dude!
What?
You just dropped 100 pounds on your face!
You're still talking about that? Old news.
As I pretended to listen to my girlfriend that night, I couldn't help thinking back to Fezwick, attempting to lift a much heavier weight than he could handle. Was lifting heavy always the way to go? Well, that is going to depend more specifically on what your own goals are, as we will see. One thing that has been thoroughly proven, regardless of gender or age, resistance training results in muscle growth. Lifting weights is also called resistance training because you're contracting your muscle fibers against resistance. In this case, the resistance is gravity resisting your muscle as you move the weight through space. Each muscle is made up of thousands of individual muscle fibers. Resistance training results in this growth, thanks to a phenomenon called mechanotransduction, where specific sensors in your individual muscle fibers, known as mechanosensors, convert this mechanical energy into chemical signals that mediate myocellular, anabolic, and catabolic pathways. In other words, once they detect that their fiber is under enough load to trip a certain threshold, they start signaling that the muscle fiber needs to grow. Something important to note also is that not all muscle fibers are the same. While they all contribute something to every rep range, type 1 fibers are better suited to long-lasting endurance, while type 2X fibers are better suited for that 1 rep max explosive power. While some people use weights with the intent on building their muscle size, others lift weights to train for strength. Lifting can be confusing. People will often tell you different things. Some will say do high reps with a light weight to maximize muscle hypertrophy. Others say use a heavy weight and go until failure. And what about strength? Are heavy weights with low reps really the only way? The idea that you need to go heavy is based on the idea that heavier weights are needed to achieve full recruitment of those higher threshold fibers, the ones that are the most stubborn to sending the growth signal. Because optimal improvements in strength and hypertrophy can only be accomplished when all the fibers in a muscle have been activated. But what does the research say? In 2016, a meta-analysis was published in the European Journal of Sports Science. Big props to Brad Schoenfeld for heading this up. It compiled 9 studies on this topic and set out to answer this question once and for all. In all of these studies, 2 groups of participants were compared, where one group was lifting weights that were above 65% of their 1 rep max strength, while the other group was lifting less than 60%. and both groups lifted the weight until they couldn't do another rep. The meta-analysis acknowledged that type 2 muscle fibers, the ones that are better for heavy weights than endurance, have a 50% greater capacity for growth. And while that is true, it has been demonstrated that even these fast-twitch type 2 muscle fibers, the ones that are best for intense bursts of strength, are worked by low weight. Just to a lesser extent. This is why it isn't entirely shocking what they found. In terms of muscle gained, the high and low weight groups both gained a similar amount. How can this be? Well, although a single rep of a heavier weight versus a lighter weight will provide greater activation to the type 2 fibers, the key lies in the fact that both groups took their sets to momentary muscle failure. So although the lightweight group got less activation per rep, their sets lasted much longer, and those additional reps, although they were a lighter weight, continued to activate the muscle until even the most stubborn fibers activated. So it looks like both light and heavy weights, as long as taken to momentary muscle failure, result in about equal hypertrophy. I say that because although it wasn't statistically significant, there was still a slight trend in favor of the higher weight. Strength was a different story, because although strength is highly correlated with muscle hypertrophy, there are various other elements at play. Physiological factors, psychological factors including confidence and fear, your motor control and technique, and CNS adaptations all play a role. These are better trained by lifting those heavier weights. So if my max bench is 225, whether I train in sets of 135 to failure or 185 to failure, the muscle hypertrophy will be about the same, as long as total work volume is equal. Whereas my 1 rep max, if tested on the spot, might increase slightly more under the higher load training due to those other factors of strength being more in practice. Lastly, it should be mentioned that muscle size and hypertrophy aren't one and the same. Because of this, people who do high reps with light weights may benefit from the illusion of larger muscles. This is because your muscles store their energy along with water, which can influence how big they look at any given time. Despite not being the result of hypertrophy, glycogen content in the muscle can significantly alter the apparent size of the muscle at any given moment. Glycogen is the primary fuel burned by your muscles after about 10 seconds of activity and continues to be the main mover until about 120 seconds. The advantage of it is that burning it is an anaerobic process, meaning it doesn't require oxygen, so the power output isn't limited by your ability to breathe in oxygen. If you aren't eating any carbs at all, such as during a fast or keto diet, muscles can look up to 16% smaller. This is why people on aggressive diets complain that their muscles look really flat. If you're eating carbs, glycogen is stored in the muscles based on their predicted need for it. The average person who doesn't resistance train stores about 350 grams or so in their muscles. And since each gram is stored with 3 grams of water, about 1.5 kilograms or 3 pounds of muscle bulk in a typical person is glycogen. In bodybuilders who train in higher rep ranges, which often exceed 10 seconds, the body predicts a greater need and stores more than the typical amount. More than double, in fact, giving them a 6 to 8% boost in muscle size over the average non-lifter simply from stored carbs. It has been theorized that someone who trains in low reps mainly for strength may not see quite as much glycogen storage in their muscles because these low rep sets rely less on glycogen. While this theory is often referenced, there has yet to be definitive proof in the form of a scientific study. But personally, when I went from training in sets of 3 to sets of 10, I noticed my muscles appear fuller as they adapted to my new training demands by storing more glycogen. But I have to say, and I think others will agree, going too light does have its drawbacks. Not only do the studies show a tiny bit less hypertrophy, it can also be harder to reach an equal volume. Going to failure with a very light weight can be a lot more agonizing, which is something to keep in mind. So lightweight, heavyweight. It seems like for hypertrophy, taking it to or close to failure is what matters primarily if you want to be guaranteed equal results. Which I think is a good excuse to mix it up. No one says you need to pick just one. Switching it up every now and then can keep workouts exciting and challenging, while providing a more targeted stimuli to all the different fiber types. But just remember to listen to your own body, and go off of what is heavy and light to you. And please, don't be a Fezwick. Thanks for watching, and if you're into it, consider subscribing. Until next time, D-Man, signing off.